It was Halloween night, and my friends and I dressed up as a Scooby-Doo gang. We were all girls, and a little too old to be trick-or-treating in 7th or 8th grade, but my friends convinced me to come with them, since they needed a 4th member to complete the group costume. I agreed because, hey, free candy. We left my friend's house at 7, and it was already pretty dark. I wasn't too familiar with the neighborhood at all. My 3 friends all lived in that area near one another, so I was just following their lead. We hit a good amount of houses, and we had traveled a pretty far distance. Though I didn't know it, we were in a totally different neighborhood that they weren't familiar with either. But no one told me that though. We reached a 1-story house with overgrown bushes and Christmas lights hanging. The lights were on, and there was a pumpkin on the porch, so we rang the doorbell like any old house. An older man, looking to be about 60, opens the door with a big smile. He gives us tons of candy, like handfuls each, and my naive self thought that he must know one of my friends. This wasn't a crazy idea. A lot of the neighbors we visited were family friends of my friends and gave us big helpings. As he hands out the candy, he starts the conversation. "You guys are older kids, huh? Where are you going as, Scooby-Doo?" We all reply yes. "What, do you guys have a party later tonight? Gonna drink? Smoke weed?" At this point, I'm sure he's family friends with Shaggy, because she laughs and says yeah, and I figure it's all a joke. As we turn to leave, the man calls us back. "Wait, since you guys are all older kids, I have something saved inside. You know, the big kid decorations. Come on, take a look." He placed his hand on my back and began pushing me in. That's when it clicked. This man is the guy my parents always warned me to avoid. One of my friends yells at the man to stop, that we have to be home now, and we don't have time. My other 2 friends had already sprinted off the porch. As I shuffled off, he called out again saying that it was a shame, maybe next time. Just thinking about it makes me shudder. Afterward, I was in a bit of a shock from what happened. I felt that the worst part of the whole situation was that I had to dump my candy out, since my friend warned me there might be razor blades in the one he gave us. And he gave us handfuls. My friend told her parents, but the reaction was extremely underwhelming. They asked what house it was, but they were drunk and relaxing. I don't think anything ever came of it. So, creepy Halloween man who wanted to show me the big kid decor? Let's not meet again. This was years ago when I was 19 years old and working at a phone store. I was closing up for the night alone when a man walked in before I could lock up. He then turned around, locked the door himself, and switched the sign to close. I knew right then and there that I was getting robbed. He looks at me with a hand in his jacket and says, "I want a phone and I don't want to pay." I give this guy the biggest grin and say, "Whatever you want, boss." And I immediately walked to give him the newest iPhone, because he came off as an iPhone guy to me. Though, I do remember being really annoyed that he dragged in a bunch of mud and water throughout the store. The dude was soaking wet because it was raining off and on all day. I was livid that I had to mop the floors again. You think of strange things in these situations. He then starts talking about how he has a gun, which was unneeded, I got the hint already, and also starts talking about how he wants the phone hooked up with service. I found this to be an extremely odd request coming from the guy robbing me. I mean, you'd think he'd just tell me to give him all the money and phones in the store, but then I realized why he made this request. He starts screaming at the alarm on the wall. I mean, freaking screaming. I realized immediately that this man was on drugs, and I might die in the store tonight. I get this man an account, hook everything up. I just wanted him to give him what he wanted and get him out of my store. As I'm doing this, he's walking around curiously and grabs a ball, crumples a paper over it, unlocks the door, and buries it. He then comes back inside and says, "Don't worry, it'll grow into something much better." I could see all of it because the entire front of the store was glass. I just gave him a weak chuckle and went with it. But then someone else pulls up to the store. It was my mom. She was picking me up because that very morning I had gotten into an accident and totaled my car. So she was going to drive me back to my place until I got my rental. After a little bit, she called the police because she knew something was wrong. and correctly assumed that I was being robbed. By the way, the whole process took forever. My freaking life was on the line, and I can't hook up phones any faster than I like to. So stop whining to me that I'm being slow. I can't do anything about it. Finally, I got his phone hooked up. He walked out of the store and let his dog out the car and started driving like crazy around the parking lot until the cops showed up. I bought a lottery ticket on the way home that night. I was convinced I used all my bad luck for the year in one day. I didn't win that ticket. My friend June and I were 15 or younger when we used to hang out all summer, riding our quad down to the river by ourselves. Her father didn't really care how long we were gone, as long as we were safe, but he worked nights as a prison guard in a different city, so he wouldn't really know where we were anyway. Well, usually things went fine. We stayed on the quad, messed around like teenagers do, got in the water, and went home. We almost always brought June's dog, Bo, and he was usually pretty useful to keep creeps away because of his size. He was a bloodhound. However, one day we stayed later than usual, and it was getting pretty dark. We stayed late before, but we didn't like to do it often, so we packed up and left. We got all the way home, put Bo away in the house, locked the quad up, and realized that June didn't have her cell phone on her. Determined not to be murdered by her dad in the morning when he found out that she lost her phone, we decided to go back for the phone. Unfortunately, the quad was low on gas at this point, so we had to take 2 spare bicycles. At first, we were only panicked because June's phone was missing, because that's a pretty big deal all by itself. But our unease grew as we rode past 2 vehicles that hadn't been on the path to the river before. The trucks were parked next to each other, and as we went by, the men exchanged goods of some sort. One of the men stuck something down his pants, and I was pretty sure I had just seen my first drug deal. And I'd always been taught I died for it. I didn't though, obviously. June waved at the men, which I remember cringing inwardly at. I don't know why I thought it was a bad idea, but I strongly believed that this could get us into trouble. We made our way to the area where we'd been sitting, searched a few places that we thought it might be, and eventually found a small silver device. It was on some river rocks, thankfully unharmed, though from its position it must have fallen off the quad. We tried to go around where we knew the vehicles to be by going through the brush, since we knew the area well, and we were both extremely uneasy. There was a rustle in the bushes to our right, and we both froze. My heart was pounding in my chest as I almost made direct eye contact with something. Its eyes were glowing. I let all of my air out at once. It was just a deer. It ran towards us and, despite knowing what it is now, we screamed a little. We gave up on going around. It was too dark and the nature would always be one step ahead of us, we decided. This was in early high school. We didn't have flashlights on our phones to see with. To our dismay, on our way back on the original path, the vehicles were there. Or at least one of them was. It's hard to remember in all honesty, and it still creeps me out to talk about the situation. We were sure we were going to get killed, or kidnapped, or worse. I remember seeing headlights pointing at us, and we rode our bikes to the right as quickly as we could. But I was always the weaker of the 2 of us, so I was falling behind. June was yelling at me to hurry up, and I'm pretty sure I had started crying at this point. I was so sure if they got one of us, it would be me. We got ahead of them enough to reach the slight curvature in the blackberry bushes that separated this part of the path from the main path, and June grabbed my hand to pull me down into the bushes. The thorns scraped against my exposed skin. I always wore shorts with my bikinis, but the rest of me was still open to the weapons of the bushes. It was worth it though, because they couldn't see us. We could hear them though. They idled their car nearby, got out, looked around a little. Where'd they go? Did you see where he went? I thought they went this way. They got back in the car eventually and the headlights faded further, closer to the river, further from our way home. So we bolted. We grabbed our bikes and we pedaled as fast as our legs could take us. We hoped so hard that we wouldn't be followed. We made it home safely. We locked the gate to the yard and we went inside and we watched the road for a while. Nobody went by. Eventually, we left the window alone. It was late. We went to the river the next day. It was a usual thing. There was something different, though, about the blackberries we've been hiding in. They'd been crushed, ran over multiple times by a car until they were almost completely flat. I don't like to think about what could have happened if we had stayed in our oh-so-perfect hiding spot any longer.